So, welcome to this chat, everybody. Today, we've got the pleasure of talking to David Curtin, who's the founder and director of Front Foot Law. David, welcome.
Thanks, Horace. Thanks for having me.
It's been such a while since we've had a chat, and you've been doing a lot these last couple of years. You started Front Foot Law, and now you've just launched Front Foot Academy. Tell us what you've been up to the last couple of years and what you've been focused on doing.
My background, as I think you know, was originally in law firms, and then I spent 13 years in various in-house legal teams. And it was sort of at the tail end of that time in the in-house legal teams that I started to have some more senior roles. I was leading a legal function, leading a regulatory compliance function, and I started to really experience firsthand some of the pains of legal operations problems without necessarily having the name legal operations to apply to those. And so it was around then I got involved in CLOC's first Australian group, which was at that stage mainly GCs talking really openly for the first time about the challenges that they were experiencing. And so for me personally, that was a point in time in the career, I suppose, of feeling frustrated with everything. I was starting to experience a much more collaborative, constructive mindset. I then joined LexFoco, which is an Australian startup specialising in two things: staffing and legal operations, embryonic practice. And then they were acquired by LOD. I left there, and then coming back to your question, I think I then started to continue to consult in legal operations through the banner of Front Foot Law. And so it was over that time of consulting for a couple of years to mainly in-house teams, and then the early stages of Front Foot Law, I just found that I was repeatedly getting the same sort of questions from people who were typically in an in-house environment, super busy, really capable people, but often so buried in work that they really didn't even have time to think about addressing some of the challenges that they were experiencing, which were exactly the same challenges that I had been experiencing. And so one of my solutions, I suppose, to try and help people who are very busy and don't have a lot of bandwidth or resourcing typically to tackle these problems was to try and address some of those questions in a very accessible format, which has taken the form of Front Foot Academy, which has just launched last week. So that's a set of 10 modules of questions that, but when we surveyed general counsel and other legal teams, these were the questions that they said they wanted to know the answers to the most. And so the idea is to create really accessible, very practical guidance on these topics, which people can access in their own time, at their own speed, and become a much more informed purchaser and decider of what they want to do in response to those sorts of questions.
Like when people talk about legal ops, it's kind of one slice of the kind of legal services market. And from a sort of vendor perspective, it's wholly different trying to sell to big law, small law, in-house, government. Everyone has slightly different characteristics. So who is Front Foot Academy targeted towards?
Well, we've taken an approach which is deliberately principles-based because you're absolutely right. You know, the market is very diverse, and the set of issues facing, for example, a massive US-based corporation with a huge team of legal operations people are quite different in one sense to the issues facing a sole general counsel working in a smaller business, let's say, based in Australia. But if you sort of look at that more closely, I think that the issues that they are experiencing tend to manifest in similar ways, and they are that the people involved find that they're not focusing on the right sort of work, that they don't have enough information about the quality of the work that they're doing. They often experience challenges with client relationships that manifests in stress and feelings of being overwhelmed. And I think one of my areas, I suppose, of interest as well in this space, which is less about productivity and more about well-being, is that there are endemic issues in this industry around well-being, and in-house lawyers in particular tend to face an incessant flow of work, which they typically have challenges to get on top of. And so the approach we've taken here is really to sort of take a principles-based approach, and it is to give people principles that they can apply in whatever context they're in, whatever level of resourcing they're in, and whatever location that they're in, because those issues are quite capable of being addressed if you apply similar logic and work through those issues. And we can come back to this perhaps if you like, but we take the view that it's very important to collect information about the specific circumstances you're in. It's not one size fits all. You've got to be really clear on what exactly are the problems that we're trying to solve in this specific situation, and why are they important, because you can't solve everything. And so you need to be clear on what's happening, how often is it happening, what are the impacts of those things, how material are those impacts, and what's their amenability to being fixed. There's certain things that are just going to be so deeply entrenched that it doesn't make sense to start with those, that you might get to them later on. But typically there are other situations where, or other issues where you can say, okay, well, this is happening all the time. It's impacting people significantly. It's affecting the organization as well as the legal team, and it's within reach. So that's the sort of thing which makes sense for us to start with, and then that may lay the foundations for some more complex initiatives where you need more cross-functional collaboration, or you might need more budget, or you might need other forms of support from other people who sometimes need to see the early wins to get on board and to support things, which is often the first time they will have seen a legal function driving change in this way. Legal teams, and I say this as a lawyer, are often great at supporting change, but they're often less comfortable and familiar with leading change. And so even equipping people with those tools to lead that process and have the confidence to say, okay, this is what we're doing. We know we're doing this for the right reasons because we've looked at the data, and having the conversation with people to say, this is what we think, and being open to challenge and being open to discussion, and hopefully achieving alignment to go forward with those initiatives.
It's almost like you're preempting my final question, because my final question was going to be, what's your nugget of wisdom? And it's like, here it is, right? 10 minutes out from the end, you've got your nugget of wisdom. But something you said to me just now was really interesting, and it resonated with me because in the product world that I live in, we're very much focused on falling in love with a problem, right? Like, stop trying to push solutions, find the problem, and then go and solve it, instead of like having these preconceived ideas. And I think what's interesting is, if you try and fit that in the broader sort of advice that people often give in this space, they often say solving these sorts of problems is all about people, process, and product, or technology, depending on who you talk to. And in your experience, and let's talk specifically about this academy product that you're offering, where are you focusing? What skills are you trying to enhance in the audience?
So I think fundamentally it's an informational deficit that we're trying to address in the first instance. So we've made it really practical, and it's probably, it's less academic, and it's more street fighting legal ops, I would say. So it's, it's looking at each of these topics and knowing that people out there who are really experienced people, who fantastic technically with legal skills and other skills that have got them to their positions. For example, if they're GCs, they've got a lot of capabilities which have got them to that position. But there are areas where they haven't had a chance, or they haven't, for whatever reason, got familiar with these other issues. So we say in each of these situations, what is this thing? How is it relevant to in-house legal teams? How do you do it? And what are the key things to be aware of? And then at the end of each module, people get a cheat sheet to summarize the key takeaways, because again, for busy people, I think it's really important to give them an easy, ready reckoner, some sort of reminder of the things that they need to take away, again, at that principles level. So in this case, we're not saying, watch the video and we'll solve all your problems. It's more about, okay, you've heard about legal change management, or you've heard about knowledge management or process improvement, but what is that exactly? And I think your point, well made, is that some of these terms can become nebulous, and they almost become a bit meaningless because they get thrown around and they become empty. And so we're really trying to peel back the layers and say, okay, what exactly is this? And also looking at the situation of in-house legal teams, back to your point of different people with different profiles of resourcing and needs. So your typical legal function doesn't have the ability to have change managers on call, or UX designers available to them, or huge teams of people who can just be sort of mobilized at the click of a fingers to solve someone's latest thought bubble. So they've got to be really selective. They're going to have to scratch and scrounge for whatever resourcing they can get access to, which includes the skill sets they might need to borrow from other teams, or they might need to get help externally. It includes financial resources, obviously budget, and even just getting permission to change certain things. So if they start looking at a tech stack, that triggers all sorts of sensitivities around data privacy and security. And even the big question for most legal teams is getting anywhere near the front of the queue, jostling for position with revenue generating functions. And so against that backdrop of, okay, we know that's your reality. We know you don't have access to all these things. So how do you do these things, notwithstanding that it's going to be hard for you to access the full suite of resources that someone, another function, for example, a sales function or an operational function, may be able to access more readily, because the principles, project management, to grab an example, they absolutely apply. And if you want to successfully manage a project, whatever it is, it could be something as small as a complex piece of legal work, or it could be something as big as a huge technology change or a massive process improvement change. You've got to manage that project somehow, but they don't have project managers on hand. So, so what are the principles that you need to apply? What are the key roles you need to fill? And what are the key sorts of things you need to do by way of documenting your scope, and then managing variations to the scope, and then taking stakeholders on the journey for documenting changes and making sure that everyone maintains alignment. And then what you do when the project finishes, by way of some form of review, to look back and work out, well, what did we achieve our goals? Did we not achieve our goals? What else do we know now? And what sort of information should we carry forward into other projects so that others can have the benefit of the work that's gone before them?
And I think one phrase you said today was my takeaway phrase, and that was street fighting legal ops. It's my favorite catchphrase. I may even put that as a title of my blog. So in the spirit of street fighting legal ops, what is your kind of final word that you might leave the audience with, so that they can take it away and win the next street fight?
I think if I could offer one suggestion, it would really be for people to, I think you touched on the issue of people, rushing to solutions in the product development context, in particular, falling in love with the problem. And I think it is really important. I often feel that this is an area where I have to push back on clients a bit to say, okay, I know you think you want to buy this particular technology, but can we just talk about what's actually happening in the team at the moment? And there's often this, it's a contrary mindset to an in-house legal function, because you're expected to have answers off the cuff in a high pressure situation. You're expected to be results oriented and forward focusing and all of those other sort of cliches that get thrown around. But but really you have to fight that and say, okay, I'm not going to jump to conclusions. I think I know these things, but I'm going to test that knowledge. I'm going to talk to I'm going to look outside of my own mindset. I'm going to talk to others in my team. Everyone's got their own experience and their own perspective, and talk to your clients as well and find out what they say. And so we often start with some interviews and surveys of people to just understand what actually is their current situation, what's working well, what are the challenges that they're facing, what's the materiality of those things. And then that is a great platform to say, okay, now we've looked at this, we're not working off hunches, we actually have some data to back this up, and you can do that pretty quickly. And then it just gives you the confidence to go forward and say, okay, well, actually we thought that was going to be this, but now we can see that a more logical way to tackle this solution. We want to get to that outcome, but we know that over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, it's going to look like this. And the change management piece, there's the other question of changing anything is inherently complex. People resist it. The first question in their mind when they are presented with something new is, what's in this for me? Which is human nature, and you've got to have a compelling answer to that to be able to get people to support and adopt the initiatives that you're proposing. So they would be the things I would probably suggest as the principles that apply to any context, is to have a good grasp of what's actually happening at the moment, and to be really mindful of the change process, so that you move at a pace which is going to be manageable and it will get you closer to your end state. Because if you don't do that well, then unfortunately it can create new thornier problems that you had to start with, which can become quite murky and complex, and can actually really undermine a change process, because people can get lost at the first turn if it doesn't happen well.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think it's one of those pieces of advice that people know, but they don't often act on. And it's wonderful to get that reminder. So thank you very much for spending the time with us today. For the audience again, go and visit frontfootacademy.com. It looks amazing. And David, thank you very much for joining us. I hope we get a chance to chat again very soon.
I hope so too, Horace. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to catch up with you again. And all the best with the next steps for Cynthia.
Thank you.